imagine for just a second that you are forced to be away from your home. Not just for a weekend or like a semester abroad, but for 20 years.
Wow, yeah. 20 years is a long time.
Right, like 20 whole years. You are completely separated from your family, from your friends, from, the very landscape that shaped who you are.
It's just an unfathomable amount of time for the human mind to process, honestly. I mean, when you break down those 2 decades, the reality of that absence becomes incredibly bleak.
Exactly, because 10 of those years are spent fighting a brutal, muddy, absolutely terrifying war. You watch your closest friends die, you do terrible things just to survive.
Yeah, the trauma of that alone is staggering.
And then finally, the war ends. You pack up your ship, you think you've survived the worst, and you are finally heading back to your living room. But the next 10 years, they are spent completely lost.
Just wandering.
Yeah, you're thrown into this terrifying, uncharted world filled with man-eating monsters, deeply angry gods who actively want you dead, and magical temptations that are like literally designed to erase your memory.
Right, to make you forget who you even are.
So through all of that unimaginable trauma, the single driving force, the only thing keeping you putting one foot in front of the other, or I guess keeping your hands on the oars, is the desperate, burning need to get back to the people you love.
Which really begs a profound question for all of us, right? Like,
Yes.
how much would you actually endure to get back to your own front door?
That is the perfect question. And today we are going completely immersive into the ultimate blueprint for every adventure story you have ever loved. We are doing a deep dive into Homer's Odyssey.
I am so excited for this one.
Me too. We've got an incredible stack of sources guiding us today. Some really detailed literary companions, deep historical analyses, and the brilliant psychological framework of Joseph Campbell's famous book, The Hero with a Thousand Faces.
Which is such an essential lens for us to use here. Because the Odyssey, I mean, it isn't just some old, dusty poem that you are forced to read in 10th grade English class.
Right, it's not just textbook material.
No, not at all. It is literally the foundational epic of Western storytelling. But at its core, beneath all the myth and the magic, it is fundamentally a story of survival.
Yeah, it really is.
It's about emotional restraint, the painful necessity of adaptability, and just the absolute ultimate test of human endurance.
So our mission for this deep dive is to explore this monumental epic and figure out what makes it a universal quest. We're going to unpack the terrifying monsters, figure out what the gods are actually doing behind the scenes, and track the evolution of a hero who realizes that brute strength isn't going to save him anymore.
The kind of strength that won the Trojan War, right?
Exactly. He has to rely entirely on his brains now. And most importantly, for you listening right now, we're going to figure out what this ancient struggle against destiny teaches us about navigating our own complicated, messy lives today.
Because if we look at Joseph Campbell's work, he points out that every mythic journey across every culture, it always starts with a single igniting question.
An igniting question, I like that.
Yeah, it's this spark that sets the hero into motion. And for Odysseus, that question is very simple on the surface, but incredibly profound when you actually dig into it. The question is, how do I ever find true home again?
I really love that phrasing, true home, because Ithaca, his island, it isn't just a dot on a map in the Mediterranean. It represents something much, much bigger.
It does.
Yeah.
As Campbell's analysis in our sources highlights, Ithaca symbolizes his true self. It symbolizes his wife, Penelope, and his son, Telemachus, who he left behind as an infant.
Right.
So the quest to get back there is what makes this a truly universal quest. It's not just about geography. It's the human soul trying to find its anchor in this chaotic, really hostile world.
But I have to push back on this idea of a purely personal, self-driven quest for a second, because when you read the summaries of these epic poems, the Greek gods are literally everywhere.
Oh, they are highly involved.
Yeah. Athena is constantly interfering. She's giving him makeovers, whispering in his ear. Poseidon is throwing literal oceans at him, destroying his ships. With all these divine beings pulling the strings, is Odysseus just a puppet?
That's a great question.
I mean, is his life entirely controlled and determined by destiny? Because if it is, the whole heroic quest thing feels a bit rigged,
It's a brilliant point, and it touches on one of the oldest philosophical debates in human history, free will versus determinism.
Yeah.
But what's fascinating is that the poem actually addresses this head-on right out of the gate.
Oh, it does.
Yeah. The very first scene in the entire epic features a divine council on Mount Olympus, and Zeus, the king of the gods, explicitly complains about this exact assumption.
Wait, Zeus gets annoyed with humans blaming him.
Exactly. He looks down at humanity and essentially says, look at these mortals, constantly blaming the gods for all their troubles. Zeus argues that humans, through their own folly, their own reckless, arrogant mistakes, they bring hardships upon themselves that are absolutely not decreed by fate.
So Zeus is sitting on his throne saying, don't blame destiny when you make a terrible decision and ruin your own life.
Precisely. The gods might set the stage, and they might create the weather, but the humans are the ones actually steering the ship into the rocks.
That is so interesting.
Our sources use Joseph Campbell to draw a really brilliant contrast here between Odysseus and another famous Greek figure to illustrate this, Oedipus.
Oh, Oedipus, right. The guy who accidentally married his mother.
Yes, that Oedipus. So Oedipus believed that fate was stronger than free will. When he realized a terrible divine prophecy had come true despite his attempts to flee it, he just surrendered to that darkness.
He gave up.
He did. He believed he was merely a puppet of the gods, so he literally blinded himself in despair. He gave up his agency entirely.
But Odysseus is fundamentally wired differently, right?
Yeah.
He refuses to surrender like that.
Counter to Oedipus, Odysseus embodies a concept that author Mary Wollstonecraft Shelley, who, by the way, wrote Frankenstein and was deeply influenced by this epic, she called it steady purpose.
Steady purpose.
Yeah, Campbell quotes her in his analysis saying, "Nothing contributes so much to tranquilizing the mind as a steady purpose, a point on which the soul may fix its intellectual eye."
I love that quote.
Right. Odysseus fights his destiny every single step of the way. He refuses to just go blank. He utilizes his free will, his intellect, and his cunning to outmaneuver the divine forces that are stacked against him.
Which means to survive this specific journey, he has to completely evolve. Because if you look at the prequel to this story, the Iliad, which covers the Trojan War, the heroes who thrived there were guys like Achilles and Ajax.
Total powerhouses.
Yeah, they were massive, heavily armored, unstoppable killing machines. It was all about brawn, sword-swinging, brute force. But I mean, you can't stop a hurricane. You can't put a goddess in a headlock.
No, you definitely can't.
Yeah.
And that is the core transition of the epic. The Odyssey requires a totally different skill set and a totally different type of hero.
So how does he change?
Well, our literary companion source emphasizes this shift. In the Iliad, glory was tied to physical prowess and a beautiful, death on the battlefield. But in the Odyssey, the hero has to be versatile. Homer uses a very specific Greek word to describe Odysseus in the opening lines. Polytropon.
Polytropon, what does that actually mean?
It translates roughly to a man of many twists and turns. It means he is adaptable, he's complex, wide-ranging in spirit, and capable of basically changing his shape, metaphorically, of course, to fit whatever bizarre situation he finds himself in.
He isn't just a hammer looking for a nail.
Exactly. He is a multi-tool. He has to use his brain.
And if we want to see that multi-tool brain in action, we really have to look at the ultimate test of brains over brawn. The Cave of the Cyclops, Polyphemus.
Oh, this is such a classic scene.
It really is. So for everyone listening, I want you to imagine that you and your best friends are suddenly locked inside the world's most terrifying escape room.
A literal nightmare escape room.
Yeah, you wake up in this dark, foul-smelling cave. The door is blocked by a solid rock boulder the size of a two-story house.
And our sources note the text is very specific about the impossible weight of this thing. A rock so heavy that 22 four-wheel wagons couldn't even budge it.
Right. And the room belongs to a giant, one-eyed shepherd monster who has decided that you and your crew are the perfect protein snacks.
Which is horrifying.
He literally starts grabbing your friends, smashing them against the floor, and eating them raw. Now, your immediate instinct as a seasoned warrior, which Odysseus is to draw your sword and stab the monster in the heart while he sleeps. Brute force.
But if Odysseus does that, he seals his own doom.
Exactly, because if you kill the giant, you can't move the boulder. You are trapped in a tomb of your own making, and you will all slowly starve to death in the dark.
It is a horrifying, seemingly impossible puzzle.
How does he get out?
Well, Odysseus solves it with sheer intellectual brilliance. He orchestrates this multi-step plan that relies entirely on psychology and deception.
Okay, break it down for us.
First, the setup. He approaches the Cyclops and offers him a gift. It's a highly concentrated, incredibly strong, unmixed wine they had brought from their ships.
So he basically gets the monster blackout drunk. It's a classic move, but the execution here is flawless.
It really is. Because the Cyclops has never had wine like this before. So while Polyphemus is heavily intoxicated and feeling generous, he asks Odysseus for his name, promising to eat him last as a sort of twisted favor.
How generous of him.
Right. But this is where Odysseus plays an incredible linguistic mind game. He looks the giant in the eye and claims his name is No Man, or in many translations, Nobody.
It's such a strange lie to tell in the moment. Like, you'd think he'd say, I'm King Agamemnon, just to scare him, but nobody is the linchpin of the whole escape.
It absolutely is.
Because once the giant passes out from the wine, Odysseus and his surviving men take a massive olive wood stake. They heat the sharpened tip in the glowing fire until it's red hot, and they drive it straight into the giant's single eye.
And the sensory details Homer provides here are just brutal. The sizzling of the eye, the screaming of the giant. Polyphemus wakes up in absolute agony, roaring so loud the cave literally shakes.
Oh, man.
He rips the stake out and starts thrashing around blindly.
And all that screaming naturally attracts the attention of the other Cyclops who live on the neighboring hills, right? They rush outside his cave in the middle of the night and yell through the boulder, Polyphemus! What's wrong? Is someone trying to kill you? Who is hurting you?
And Polyphemus yells back the name he was given. He screams, No man is hurting me. Or, Nobody is hurting me by fraud and not by force.
The other giants outside just stop. You can almost see them shrug in the dark. They basically say, well, if nobody is hurting you, it must be a sickness sent from the gods. We can't help you with that. Stop making so much noise and go to sleep.
And they just walk away.
It's a genius trick. Odysseus literally weaponized grammar to save his life.
It perfectly illustrates that concept of polytropon. He anticipated the giant's reaction and neutralized the reinforcement before they even arrived.
But the puzzle isn't totally solved yet, is it?
No, it's not. The giant is blind, sure, but the boulder is still in the way, and the giant is now sitting in the doorway with his arms stretched out, waiting to grab anyone who tries to run past.
So how do you get out past a giant feeling around for you?
Well, Odysseus notices the giant's massive flocks of sheep inside the cave. When morning comes, the giant has to roll the boulder aside to let the sheep out to graze. So Odysseus ties his men underneath the bellies of the largest rams, binding them together in groups of 3.
That's so clever.
He himself clings to the belly of the prize ram. As the sheep walk out, the blind giant strokes the tops of their fleeces to make sure no humans are riding them.
He literally checks their backs, never thinking to check underneath.
Exactly. They slip right past his hands, out the door, and into the sunlight. It is a masterpiece of tactical survival. They untie themselves, sprint to their ship, and push off into the water. They are free.
But, and this is a massive, massive but, here's where the story gets really frustrating. Because the plan worked perfectly. They are on their ships, rowing away. They survived. But Odysseus just can't leave well enough alone, can he?
No, he cannot. His ego takes over completely.
This is the defining mistake of the entire 20-year saga.
It really is. This is the exact folly that Zeus was talking about in the very first scene. In a moment of sheer hubris, as the ship is sailing away, Odysseus realizes that nobody's going to get the credit for defeating this terrifying monster.
Right. He wants the clout.
Yes. His warrior pride, his need for kleos, which is the Greek concept of immortal fame and glory, it just bubbles right to the surface. He wants the world to know who outsmarted the giant. So, from the deck of the ship, he shouts his real name back at the shore.
He practically screams it. He says, if anyone asks who blinded you, tell them it was Odysseus, sacker of cities, son of Laertes, who lives in Ithaca. I mean, it's the ancient equivalent of giving out your home address in a video game lobby after you beat someone.
It's just an unbelievably reckless, unnecessary flex.
And a catastrophic one.
Oh, incredibly catastrophic. Because Polyphemus isn't just some random, solitary monster. He is the son of Poseidon, the god of the sea, the earth shaker.
Oh, no.
Yeah. Armed with Odysseus's full legal name and home address, Polyphemus walks down to the water, lifts his hands to the sky, and prays to his father. He curses Odysseus, begging Poseidon to make sure Odysseus never reaches home. Or, if destiny decrees that he absolutely must reach home, let him arrive late, broken, without a single member of his crew, on a stranger's ship, and to a house full of unimaginable trouble.
And Poseidon, the god of the ocean, hears every single word. Because Odysseus just had to yell his name because his ego needed the applause, he is now made a personal blood feud enemy of the divine being who controls the very medium he needs to cross to get back to his family.
Exactly. He has to sail across Poseidon's domain, and Poseidon now wants him dead.
This completely reframes that whole puppet of destiny argument we discussed earlier, doesn't it? He literally manufactured his own tragic destiny in that moment.
He really did. Poseidon's relentless wrath for the next decade is the direct, unavoidable result of Odysseus's own vanity. He isn't a puppet here. He handed the strings to the god himself.
It's such a hard lesson in checking your ego. So now he's battling sea monsters and furious gods because of his own mistake. But as we keep going through the sources, we see that some of the most terrifying threats in this epic aren't violent at all.
That's very true.
They don't have teeth or spears. They are purely psychological.
This is where Joseph Campbell's analysis of the hero's journey, specifically the stage of resisting seductions, becomes so vital to understanding the Odyssey. The monsters test his body, but the seductions, they test his soul.
We see this early on with the episode of the Lotus Eaters, right?
Yes, exactly. The crew is blown off course and lands on this strange shoreline. And the locals there aren't hostile. They aren't cannibals. They are perfectly friendly, actually. They just offer the tired sailors some of their local food, the lotus fruit.
But the fruit is magical.
It acts as an incredibly potent narcotic. The text describes how it completely obliterates the willpower and the memory of anyone who eats it.
Wow.
The men who taste the lotus instantly lose all desire to ever return to Ithaca. The concept of home, the faces of their wives and children, the very idea of their past, it all just dissolves. They just want to stay there, sitting on the beach in a hazy, euphoric dream state forever.
It's a non-violent threat, but it's arguably more dangerous to the quest than a Cyclops. I mean, a Cyclops kills you, but the Lotus kills the quest itself.
That is a brilliant way to put it. Odysseus actually has to physically drag his weeping men back to the ships by their hair and tie them to the rowing benches beneath the decks just to get them away from it.
And this theme of psychological seduction escalates significantly later in the journey, when Odysseus faces an even more profound temptation with the goddess Calypso.
Calypso is fascinating. He washes up on her island, Ogygia, completely alone. His ship is gone, his crew is dead. And Calypso, who is this beautiful, immortal nymph, falls deeply in love with him.
And she keeps him there for a long time, doesn't she?
7 years.
Yeah.
She keeps him there for 7 years. And she doesn't just offer him a comfortable life. She literally offers him immortality.
That's insane.
She looks at this exhausted, traumatized man and says, "Stay here on my beautiful island. Be my husband. You will never experience pain again. You will never age. You will be a god."
It is the ultimate offer. If we pause and think about what this means. For the listener, put yourself in his shoes for a moment. You have been fighting for years. You have watched your friends be eaten alive, drowned, crushed. You are broken. And someone offers you eternal life in a perfect paradise, free from all suffering, if you just stop trying to go home.
If you just let go of the past.
I think a lot of people would take that deal. Why doesn't he?
Because to take the deal is to surrender his humanity. What's fascinating here is how this relates directly to our own lives and our own psychology. Sometimes the greatest threat to achieving your goals, to finding your true home or your true self, isn't a terrifying obstacle or a massive, crushing failure.
That's the comfort, right?
Exactly. It's the comfortable temptation to just give up. It's the lure of settling for a lesser, easier reality because the journey you started is just too painful.
He sits on the beach of her island every single day, staring out at the ocean, crying. It's heartbreaking.
Yes. Odysseus refusing Calypso's offer of immortality is one of the most profound assertions of his human steady purpose in the entire epic. By rejecting her, he is actively choosing mortal suffering.
He is choosing the certainty of aging, the pain of grief, and eventual death.
Why? Because a mortal life with Penelope, who is his true equal and his true home, has more meaning to him than eternal painless perfection without her. He chooses the hard path because it is the human path.
He chooses to remain mortal. And speaking of the hard path, it honestly doesn't get any harder or darker than the mission he receives from another magical woman he meets, the witch goddess Susi.
Oh, this marks a massive turning point in the epic.
It really does. Circe tells him that to find his way home, he can't just follow the stars or read a map. He has to consult a ghost. He has to journey to the underworld.
Yes. In the structure of the epic, this is known as the Nesia, or the Book of the Dead. It is a foundational element of the hero's journey, the descent into the abyss, the confrontation with mortality.
And Circe gives him horrifying, highly specific instructions.
Very specific. He must sail his ship to the very edge of the world, past the deep-flowing river Oceanus, to a place shrouded in eternal cloud and darkness where the sun never shines.
Just getting there sounds like a nightmare. And when he arrives at this dark shore, he basically has to perform a blood magic ritual.
Exactly. He has to dig a trench in the dirt, roughly a cubit long and a cubit wide. Around this trench, he must pour libations to the dead first milk and honey, then sweet wine, and finally pure water, sprinkling white barley over it all.
But the crucial element is life force, right?
It is. He must take a black ram and a black ewe, hold them over the dark pit, and slit their throats, letting their hot blood pool into the trench.
The visual Homer paints here is absolutely terrifying. You have this solitary, exhausted king standing on the edge of the abyss. His sword is drawn. He is guarding a literal pool of blood. And from the shadows, out of the earth, the wailing, shrieking souls of the dead begin to swarm around him.
Brides, old men, young soldiers, still in their bloody armor.
Yeah, they are all desperate, clawing to drink the blood so they can momentarily remember who they were and speak to him, but he has to fight them off with his sword.
Because he's there for one specific soul. He is waiting for Tiresias, the blind Theban prophet.
Out of all the dead souls in history, why Tiresias? Why is this one guy the key to getting home?
Well, according to the mythology established in the text, Tiresias is unique. He's the only soul whose intellect, memory, and sentience were spared by Persephone, the dread queen of the underworld.
So he's not like the other ghosts.
No, the other ghosts are just flitting, squeaking shadows, amnesiac wraiths who don't even know their own names until they drink the blood. But Tiresias already knows who he is. He retains his prophetic vision even in death.
So he acts as a kind of spiritual guide.
Exactly. He is Odysseus's map of moral navigation. Tiresias doesn't just give him literal sailing directions. He warns him about the moral tests that lie ahead.
Specifically, he issues a dire warning about the sacred cattle of the sun god, right?
Yes. He tells Odysseus that if his men harm those cattle, the ship will be destroyed and he will lose everyone. And crucially, Tiresias prophesies Odysseus' final, mysterious journey that must happen even after he wins his home back, which we will definitely discuss later.
But reading this section, the real emotional core of this descent into the underworld isn't the prophecy or the navigation tips. It's the intensely personal encounters he has while standing by that pit of blood.
It's so tragic.
Because while he's waiting, holding back the dead, he sees someone that absolutely shatters him. A ghost steps forward, and it's his mother, Anticlea.
And the real tragedy is he had no idea she was dead. When he left Ithaca for the Trojan War 20 years ago, she was alive and well. He has been picturing her waiting for him this entire time.
You can't even begin to imagine that shock. You are standing in literal hell, trying to stay focused on a mission, and your own mother walks up to the pit of blood. He lets her drink so she can recognize him, and the first thing he asks her is how she died.
He assumes it was a disease or maybe a painless sudden death from the arrows of Artemis.
And she looks at him and tells him no, it wasn't disease. She died of a broken heart. She died from the sheer agonizing grief of waiting for him to come home.
It is arguably one of the most agonizing moments in classical literature. The guilt he must feel in that moment is overwhelming. He is so overcome with love and sorrow that he tries to embrace her.
But he can't, can he?
No. The text is heartbreakingly specific. It says 3 times he springs forward, throwing his arms out to hug his mother, and 3 times she slips through his arms like a shadow or like a dream. He's left holding nothing but cold air.
Our sources note that this specific, devastating image, trying to physically hug a lost loved one and grasping empty space, was so incredibly powerful that it echoed through literary history.
Oh, absolutely.
It was heavily adopted centuries later by the Roman poet Virgil in his own epic, the Aeneid. It perfectly, viscerally captures the absolute permanence and untouchability of death.
It does. And it also highlights the Homeric text's incredibly bleak, chilling view of the afterlife. I mean, if we look at how different religions and cultures around the world view heaven and hell, we often see concepts of glorious reward for the righteous or fiery, agonizing punishment for the wicked.
Right, you have pearly gates, or Valhalla for brave warriors, or beautiful fields of paradise in various traditions.
Exactly. But the Greek underworld isn't like that at all.
Not for the vast majority of people, anyway.
Right. The Homeric underworld is mostly just empty. It's a joyless, dark, subterranean cavern of insubstantial wraiths wandering aimlessly in the gloom. Now, yes, if you go deep enough, there are specific realms of punishment, but those are mostly reserved for mythological figures who directly, personally defied or insulted the gods.
Like Tantalus.
Exactly. Tantalus, who served his own son as food to the gods, is punished by forever standing in a pool of water that recedes when he tries to drink, beneath fruit branches that the wind blows away when he reaches up. Hence our word, tantalize. Or Sisyphus, eternally pushing that heavy boulder up the hill, only for it to roll back down.
But for normal people, even the good ones, it's not a place of torture. It's just a place of immense sadness. It's a dark realm of endless loss, fading memory, and regret.
Which brings us to perhaps the most worldview-shifting conversation Odysseus has down there. After his mother, The crowd of ghosts parts, and he meets the spirit of Achilles.
No, we have to set the context for Achilles for our listeners. Achilles is the ultimate Greek hero. He is the star of the Iliad. He is like the Michael Jordan of ancient warfare.
That's a great comparison.
He was offered a choice by the gods. Live a long, peaceful, but forgettable life at home, or die young in glorious battle at Troy and have your name remembered forever. Achilles chose the short, glorious life. He died in battle. His name is legendary. So Odysseus sees him in the underworld and tries to comfort him.
Odysseus approaches him with immense respect. He says, essentially, Achilles, you are honored like a god in life, and now you rule with great authority over the dead here in the underworld. You shouldn't be sad. You won the ultimate prize, eternal glory.
And Achilles delivers a shocking rebuttal that completely subverts everything Greek culture believed in up to that point. It turns the heroic ideals of the Iliad completely upside down.
Achilles looks at him and says, do not try to console me about death, glorious Odysseus. I would rather be a living slave working as a field hand for a poor landless dirt farmer than rule as king over all the exhausted dead.
Just let that sink in. It's like meeting your absolute childhood idol, the person you pattern your entire life and career after, and having them look you dead in the eye and tell you that everything they stood for, everything you stand for, is a complete lie.
It's devastating.
The glory of dying in battle, the songs they sing about you, he's saying it's worthless.
The philosophical weight of this moment cannot be overstated. It fundamentally shifts Odysseus's worldview, and by extension, the worldview of the Greek audience listening to the poem. It's the final nail in the coffin of Odysseus's old identity.
So the Iliad's warrior code prioritized dying a glorious death to achieve kleos. But Achilles, the poster boy for that exact code, is telling him from beyond the grave that survival is the only thing that matters.
Being alive, breathing the air, feeling the sun, even in the lowest, most humiliating possible station in life, is infinitely better than glorious death.
It's Homer deconstructing his own previous work. It reinforces everything Odysseus has been forced to learn on this journey. He has transitioned from a glory-hungry warrior who yells his name at monsters to a pragmatic survivor who understands that he must endure any humiliation, any pain, just to stay alive.
And he is going to need that absolute pragmatism immediately. Because when he leaves the underworld and returns to the land of the living, he is faced with a terrifying reality. He now has Tiresias's map of moral navigation and Circe's specific geographic warnings.
And they point him toward what is basically an impossible leadership choice, don't they?
They really do. To get home, his single surviving ship has to pass through a narrow, treacherous strait of water guarded by two divine horrors.
On one side of the strait is Charybdis.
Charybdis is a massive divine whirlpool. 3 times a day, she sucks down the entire sea into a boiling, roaring cauldron and then violently spits it back up. If a ship gets caught in her pull, it is guaranteed inescapable death for absolutely everyone on board. The wood is splintered, the men are drowned, 0 survival rate.
So obviously you steer away from Charybdis, but on the other side of the narrow strait, living high up in a dark cliff cave, is Scylla. And Scylla is the stuff of nightmares.
Oh, she is horrifying.
She is a terrifying monster with 12 deformed legs, 6 incredibly long serpentine necks, and 6 horrific heads. And inside each head are 3 rows of thick, interlocked, flesh-tearing teeth.
And she fishes from her cliff. As ships pass below to avoid the whirlpool, she darts her 6 heads down and snatches men right off the decks, dragging them screaming up into her cave to eat them.
So, Circe gives Odysseus the brutal, cold, tactical advice before he leaves. She tells him he cannot fight Scylla. Weapons are useless against her. If he tries to fight, she will just eat more men. Circe says he must hug the cliff of Scylla and row as fast as humanly possible.
It's a terrifying equation. If he steers near the whirlpool of Charybdis, he loses the ship and all his men die. If he steers near the monster Scylla, he will definitively, unavoidably lose 6 men, 1 for each of her heads. But the rest of the ship will survive.
It is the trolley problem of the ancient world. It is the ultimate sacrifice. And what makes this a profound, almost disturbing test of leadership is that Odysseus chooses not to tell his men what is about to happen.
He keeps the terrible truth entirely to himself.
For everyone listening, put yourself in his shoes on the deck of that ship. You know for an absolute fact that in the next 10 minutes, 6 of the men rowing below you, 6 of your brothers in arms who have survived a 10-year war and 10 years of monsters with you, are going to be snatched into the air, eaten alive, screaming your name for help.
It's unthinkable.
And you have to just watch it happen, do nothing, and tell the others to keep rowing. Because if you tell them beforehand what happens, they might panic. They might drop the oars, hide below decks, and the ship drifts into the whirlpool where everyone dies.
Right. He has no choice.
So you stay silent. You force them to row directly into a nightmare. Is this brilliant, pragmatic leadership, or is it cold-hearted calculation?
It's the incredibly heavy, isolating burden of command.
Mm.
And the sources describe the intense emotional toll it takes on him. The text doesn't brush past it. As Scylla strikes, snatching the 6 strongest men, they dangle in the air, calling out Odysseus' name for the last time in agony.
It haunts him.
It does. Odysseus later narrates this moment, comparing them to fish riding on a line. He says it was the most piteous, heartrending thing he ever saw in all his sufferings at sea. He bears the guilt of that silence for the rest of his life.
But the crew doesn't know the impossible choice he had to make. All they know is that their captain steered them into a monster's mouth and didn't try to fight back. Their trust in him is severely fraying.
And that fragile trust, finally, violently snaps on the island of Thrinacia.
This is the exact catastrophe that Tiresias warned him about in the underworld.
Yes, Thrinacia is the island of the sun god Hyperion, and the island is populated by the god's beautiful, sacred, immortal cattle. Odysseus knows the prophecy. He knows that touching these animals brings doom, so he makes his starving, exhausted men swear a solemn oath not to touch a single cow or sheep.
And initially they obey. But they get stranded by a supernatural storm. The winds blow relentlessly for a full month. They can't leave the island. The food they brought in the ship runs out. They start trying to catch fish and birds, but it's not enough. They are literally, agonizingly starving to death on the beach, surrounded by plump, sacred cows.
It is a test of restraint that they simply cannot pass.
Yeah.
One day, Odysseus goes inland, alone, to pray to the gods for some kind of salvation, and the gods cast a deep sleep over him. While he is asleep, his second-in-command, Eurylochus, stages a mutiny.
Eurylochus gathers the starving men and gives a deeply human, rational speech. He basically says, listen, we've faced every kind of horror, but starvation is the most pitiful, wretched way for a man to die. Let's slaughter the cattle and eat.
He argues it's better to face the god's wrath than starve.
Exactly. He says if the sun god gets angry and destroys our ship when we leave, so be it. It is better to drown instantly in the ocean, gasping for a moment, than to slowly waste away to skin and bones on this beach.
It is the absolute breaking point of human physical endurance. They slaughter the sacred cattle, they roast the meat, and when Odysseus wakes up and smells the smoke, he knows the quest is doomed. The cosmic retaliation is swift and absolute.
The sun god goes to Zeus and demands vengeance.
And Zeus delivers. As soon as the men finally set sail, thinking they've escaped, a massive supernatural storm erupts. Zeus strikes their ship directly with a blinding, fiery thunderbolt. The ship is blown to splinters. The men are thrown into the boiling sea.
Every single man drowns. Every single one. Except Odysseus.
Because he didn't eat the meat. He kept the oath. But his survival here pushes past the limits of normal human possibility. He's floating in the middle of a raging sea, surrounded by the corpses of his friends.
He manages to grab the broken mast and the keel of the ship, lashing them together with a leather strap to make a tiny, unstable raft. But the wind shifts, the storm blows him backward, retracing his path right back into the deadly strait, right back to Charybdis.
The whirlpool that he sacrificed 6 men to avoid. And this time he is alone on a piece of wood. The whirlpool sucks his makeshift raft down into the abyss.
But Odysseus survives by an act of sheer, desperate athleticism. Just as the raft is sucked down, he leaps up and grabs onto a giant fig tree growing out of the cliff wall hanging over the whirlpool.
It's an incredible image.
He clings to the trunk like a bat. He hangs there, dangling by his fingers over the roaring, bottomless abyss of Charybdis for hours. He can't climb up the cliff, and if he lets go, he dies. He just waits, relying on his knowledge of the natural rhythm of the whirlpool until she finally spits his broken mast back out to the surface.
Our sources draw a brilliant connection here to the modern world, comparing Odysseus' physical and mental endurance to modern solo yachtspeople who endure unimaginable isolation and physical strain in the open ocean.
The stamina is unreal.
The sheer stamina required to drop down onto that piece of wreckage, paddle with his bare hands to escape the current, and then float aimlessly for 9 days under the burning sun until he washes up on Calypso's island.
Which is where our story actually began, with Calypso. He survives through intense, isolated endurance, and it's only after he finally escapes Calypso and tells this massive story to a friendly kingdom called the Phaeacians that they take pity on him. They put him on one of their magical ships and they sail him home, which finally brings us to the moment he's been dreaming of for 20 years.
The return to Ithaca. The Phaeacians drop him off on the beach in the middle of the night, fast asleep with a pile of treasure, and they leave. When Odysseus wakes up, he is home.
But he doesn't know it, because the goddess Athena, his divine patron, covers the entire landscape in a thick magical mist to disorient him. He wakes up, looks around at the foggy beach, and thinks he's been betrayed again. He thinks he's on another monster-infested island.
Athena eventually parts the mist and reveals herself. She tells him the truth. He is standing on the soil of Ithaca.
Finally.
But she doesn't give him a grand, triumphant hero's welcome. She doesn't hand him a crown and say, "Go reclaim your throne." Instead, she physically transforms him. She withers his muscular skin, removes his auburn hair, makes his bright eyes dull and rheumy, and dresses him in filthy, squalid, tattered rags.
She turns the majestic, legendary king into a wrinkled, bald, pathetic beggar.
Exact.
Now, if you're reading this for the first time, you have to ask, why the disguise? Why all the cloak and dagger? He's the rightful king. Why can't he just march up the hill to his palace, kick open the doors, and say, "The king has returned"?
Because of what he learned in the underworld. Remember the ghost of King Agamemnon?
Right, the commander of the Greek army.
Yes. Agamemnon won the war, sailed home, marched proudly into his house expecting a hero's welcome, and was immediately brutally murdered by his own wife and her lover in his bathtub. Agamemnon's ghost explicitly warned Odysseus, "Never trust anyone, not even your wife. Arrive in secret."
Odysseus knows he is walking into a highly volatile, incredibly dangerous political situation. His island isn't peaceful, it is infested. Over 100 violent, arrogant young noblemen from the surrounding islands, known as the suitors, have essentially invaded his home.
They're a massive problem.
They believe Odysseus is dead, they have moved into his palace, they are eating all his livestock, drinking his wine cellars dry, and trying to force his fiercely intelligent wife, Penelope, to marry one of them so they can take the throne.
And worse, they are actively plotting an ambush to assassinate his teenage son, Telemachus, who is the only rightful heir.
So, if Odysseus walks through those doors as the king, 108 armed, desperate men will just swarm him and stab him to death. The journey isn't over. The final boss isn't a monster, it's the corruption of his own home. To survive, he has to swallow every ounce of his warrior pride. He has to become the ultimate master of mind games.
He starts his infiltration from the bottom. He seeks out the one person on the outskirts of the island he hopes he can still trust, his loyal swineherd, Eumaeus. Eumaeus lives in the dirt, tending the pigs. And what's beautifully detailed in our sources is that Homer takes the time to elevate this seemingly lowly character.
Eumaeus is not just a simple, uneducated servant.
Not at all. Over a fire, he reveals his own tragic autobiography to the disguised Odysseus.
Eumaeus is actually a kidnapped prince.
Yes. He was born royalty on another island, kidnapped by pirates as a child, sold into slavery, and bought by Odysseus' father. Despite his low station in life, Eumaeus possesses a deeply noble soul. He embodies the sacred Greek laws of hospitality known as Xenia. He takes the filthy beggar in, slaughters a pig for him, and treats him with profound respect, proving his good character.
And Odysseus, operating purely on survival instinct, tests everyone. He even tests Eumaeus. He invents these elaborate, highly detailed, spontaneous lies about his past. The text refers to them as his Cretan tales.
He's constantly spinning these webs.
He spins these massive fictions about being a disgraced soldier from Crete who lost his fortune, using these stories to protect his true identity while subtly gathering intelligence about the political landscape of his home. He is probing to see who is loyal to the memory of the king and who has betrayed him.
The emotional pacing of this section of the epic is incredibly poignant. It builds tension while delivering intense emotional highs. Eventually, Odysseus reveals himself to his son, Telemachus, inside Eumaeus' hut. Athena momentarily removes the beggar disguise, restoring his godlike youthful appearance.
Telemachus is so shocked by the sudden transformation that he thinks he's looking at a deity.
He does. The reunion of a father and the son he left as an infant is a powerful moment. They weep together, but then they immediately get down to business, plotting their revenge against the 108 suitors.
But for all the human drama, the absolute emotional peak of his return, the moment that breaks the heart of almost every reader, is the tragedy of his dog, Argos.
Oh, yes. This scene is devastating.
It is. Odysseus, back in his beggar disguise, is finally walking up the path to his own palace with Eumaeus. And there, lying in the dirt outside the gates on a pile of manure, completely neglected, half-starved, and covered in ticks, is an incredibly old hunting dog. It's Argos.
Odysseus bred and trained him from a puppy before he left for Troy 20 years ago. The dog was famous for his speed and tracking, but now, with the master gone, the servants have let him rot in the dirt.
And despite the rags, despite the dirt, despite the wrinkled skin and the changed voice, despite Athena's divine magical disguise that has perfectly fooled every human being he has encountered, the dog knows. Dogs know.
Argos recognizes his master immediately. He's too weak, too close to death to even stand up or bark. He just flattens his ears against his head and feebly wags his tail, looking up at the man he has waited 20 years for.
But Odysseus can't acknowledge him. He can't run over and hug his childhood dog. If he kneels down to pet this specific hound, the suitor's guards will instantly know he isn't a random vagrant from Crete. It will ruin the entire infiltration.
It would ruin everything.
So the man who fought a cyclops, who survived the underworld, who clung to a cliff over a whirlpool, has to turn his head away from his best friend and secretly wipe a single tear from his eye. He walks past him.
And Argos, having finally seen his master come home, having completed his own long wait, simply closes his eyes and passes away in the dirt.
It is a masterful, devastating piece of storytelling by Homer. It perfectly encapsulates the terrible cost of Odysseus's 20-year absence, the cruelty of the suitors who let the dog rot, and the brutal, agonizing necessity of Odysseus's current disguise. It proves he has mastered his emotions, which leads directly into the ultimate test of his restraint.
Because now the disguised king enters his own house. He crosses the threshold of his own grand hall. He sits on the floor near the ash of the fire like a beggar, stretching out his hand for scraps of his own food, watching these arrogant men waste his wealth, drink his wine, and verbally abuse his loyal servants.
And they don't just abuse the servants, they actively, physically abuse him. The psychological torment he endures here is severe. Men like Antinous, the cruelest and most arrogant leader of the suitors, hurl insults at him. Antinous actually picks up a heavy wooden footstool and throws it across the room, striking Odysseus hard in the back.
It's infuriating to read.
Later, another suitor named Statistippus mocks him and throws a bloody cow's hoof right at his head. Odysseus barely dodges it.
Imagine the volcanic rage inside him in those moments. He is a warrior king. He killed the greatest champions of Troy. He could snap the necks of these soft-spoiled noblemen in an instant. His every instinct must be screaming to draw a sword, scream his name, and fight them all.
But if he does, he dies. He is outnumbered 108 to 1. He endures the humiliation silently. He takes the hits. He suppresses his warrior rage. His ability to check his ego, which is the exact opposite of what he did when he yelled his name at the Cyclops 10 years ago, is now his greatest, most lethal weapon.
He is a predator, hiding in plain sight, waiting for the perfect calculated moment to strike. And that moment isn't chosen by him. It is brilliantly orchestrated by his wife, Penelope.
Penelope is feeling the immense political and social pressure. The suitors have discovered that she was tricking them. She had promised to pick a husband when she finished weaving a burial shroud for Odysseus' father, but she was secretly unraveling her day's work every single night to stall for time.
She's so smart.
Now the trick is exposed. She can't hold them off anymore, so she devises a brilliant test.
In many ways, Penelope is the true female counterpart to Odysseus. She is just as polytropon, just as cunning and adaptable as he is. She goes deep into the hidden, locked storerooms of the palace and retrieves Odysseus' massive, incredibly stiff hunting bow.
Our listeners requested we draw a specific cultural comparison here, and it fits perfectly. Penelope announces a Swayamvar-style test. A Swayamvar is an ancient tradition very prominent in ancient Indian epics where a royal bride chooses a husband from a group of assembled suitors, almost always through an impossible test of physical skill.
It's a recurring motif in global mythology, highlighting the universal nature of these stories that Campbell talks about. In the Hindu epic, the Ramayana, King Janaka sets a condition for his daughter, Sita's Swayamvar. The suitors must lift and string the massive divine bow of Lord Shiva. All the arrogant kings fail, and only the hero Rama succeeds.
And similarly, in the Mahabharata, King Draupadi sets a Swayamvar condition for his daughter Draupadi. The winner must string a massive bow and shoot 5 arrows through a revolving ring into the eye of a wooden fish, looking only at its reflection in a pool of water below.
That's incredibly difficult.
The hero Arjuna, who is actually in hiding and disguised as a poor Brahmin, just like Odysseus disguised as a beggar, steps up after the nobles fail, and he hits the target perfectly.
The parallels are striking and undeniable. Penelope issues her challenge. Whoever can string this great bow and shoot a single arrow cleanly through the small rings of 12 axe heads lined up in a row, that man will win her hand in marriage and become the new king of Ithaca.
It's a genius political move by Penelope. She subconsciously, or perhaps consciously, knows that only her husband has the immense physical strength the specific technique, and the intimate knowledge of the wood to string that particular bow. She sets a test designed for them to fail.
And she's right.
The arrogant suitors step up one by one. They try to bend the bow to slip the string on. They grease it with hot fat to make it pliable. They strain, they sweat, and they fail miserably. They can't even bend the wood. They are humiliating themselves in front of the whole court.
And then the squalid, mocked beggar sitting in the corner steps up and humbly asks for a try. The suitors are outraged. They're terrified he might actually do it and shame them further. But Penelope, exercising her authority, insists the stranger be given a chance. Telemachus then sends his mother upstairs to safety.
The great hall goes dead silent. The beggar takes the bow in his hands. He turns it over, checking it for termite damage after 20 years. And the text describes what happens next beautifully. It says he handles the deadly weapon not like a brute swinging a club, but like an expert musician stringing a lyre.
Effortless.
Smooth. He slips the string into the notch, plucks it, and the string sings out a sharp, clear note like the cry of a swallow.
The color drains from the faces of the suitors. Zeus sends a single loud thunderclap to signal his divine approval.
Odysseus doesn't even stand up. Still sitting on his stool, he fits an arrow to the string, draws it back, and shoots it perfectly, cleanly through the holes of all 12 axe heads. The arrow thuds into the heavy wooden door at the far end of the hall. The impossible test is passed.
This is the cinematic climax of the epic. The tension that has been building for 20 years finally snaps.
Odysseus stands up. He strips off his filthy rags. He dumps his heavy quiver full of deadly arrows onto the floor right at his feet. He turns to the terrified men and announces his true identity. And before the suitors can even draw their swords or process what is happening, he aims his next arrow directly at Antinous, the cruelest leader who threw the footstool.
The one who started it all.
Antinous is just lifting a beautiful two-handled golden cup of wine to his lips, completely oblivious. Odysseus shoots him straight through the throat. The arrow point punches clear through his neck. The cup falls. Antinous kicks the table over as he dies, splashing food and blood across the floor.
The suitors scramble for the weapons that usually hang on the walls, but Telemachus had secretly removed them the night before. The doors have been locked from the outside by the loyal servants Eumaeus and Phalucius. They are trapped in a sealed room with a legendary killer. The reckoning begins.
It is a brutal, chaotic, and terrifyingly violent sequence. Odysseus, Telemachus, and the two herdsmen systematically slaughter all 108 suitors. The hall runs rivers of blood. It is an absolute massacre.
It is grim reading. But what is truly profound and what highlights the massive internal evolution of Odysseus is what happens immediately afterward. Once the suitors are all dead, and Odysseus is standing there covered in gore, the old loyal nurse, Euryclea, enters the hall.
What does she do?
She sees the slaughter of the men who tormented her household, and her immediate instinct is to raise a high-pitched shout of triumph, to gloat and celebrate over the dead enemies.
Because that's exactly what you do in the Iliad. When a warrior kills an enemy at Troy, he stands over the body, beats his chest, strips the armor, and gloats. That is the old way.
Exactly. But Odysseus stops her. He silences her shout of joy, and he says something incredibly profound. Rejoice in your heart, old woman, but restrain yourself and do not shout aloud. Vaunting over men slain is a monstrous thing.
Daunting over men slain is a monstrous thing. That is incredible.
This is the ultimate proof of how much his 20-year journey has changed his soul. He is no longer the glory-hungry warrior of Troy who screamed his name at the Cyclops just to get the credit. He views the killing not as a glorious personal victory to celebrate, but as a grim, divinely mandated execution.
He's acting as an instrument of justice.
Yes, he is acting as an instrument of cosmic justice, punishing those who violated the sacred laws of hospitality and tried to destroy a family. He finds absolutely no joy in the killing. It's a new morality.
The toxic warrior culture is dead. Okay, so the house is cleared, the threat is eliminated, he has his kingdom back, but he still has to win back the most important person, his wife. Which brings us to the final emotional hurdle. Penelope comes down the stairs.
And it's a tense moment.
She looks at him. He is covered in blood, leaning against a pillar. But she remains aloof. She is too smart, too guarded, and too deeply traumatized after 20 years of fending off liars, con men, and imposters, claiming to have news of her husband, to just blindly trust that this violent stranger is who he says he is.
She needs absolute proof. Proofs that goes beyond a recognizable physical scar or knowing the names of his dogs. She needs psychological proof. So she tests him with a secret known only to the two of them. She turns to her servant, Euryclea, and casually orders her to move their heavy marital bed out of the master bedroom and into the hall so the stranger can sleep on it.
It sounds like a simple request to a servant, but Odysseus absolutely explodes in anger.
He loses his temper completely, which proves he isn't acting anymore.
He yells, "Who moved my bed? That's impossible. No mortal man could move it." And in his outrage, he reveals the final intimate secret. When he was a young man building the palace, there was a massive, ancient, living olive tree growing on the highest point of the land. Instead of cutting it down to clear the space, he built the stone walls of the master bedroom around the tree.
He incorporated it into the house.
He cut off the branches, smoothed the trunk of the living tree with an adze, and carved it into the main bedpost. He built the bed onto the living tree. It is rooted deep into the earth itself. It literally physically cannot be moved unless someone chops down the tree.
It is the perfect, poetic symbol of their marriage. Deeply rooted, vibrantly alive, uniquely theirs, and utterly immovable despite the chaotic storm swirling around it. When he passionately details the construction of this bed, Penelope's heavy emotional defenses finally completely crumble. She knows it's him. No one else has ever seen that room.
She bursts into tears, runs across the room, throws her arms around his neck, kissing his face. And Homer gives us what I honestly believe is the most beautiful, emotionally resonant simile in the entire epic.
The shipwreck simile.
Yes. Her relief, her sheer exhausting joy at finally holding her husband again after 20 years of psychological warfare is compared to a shipwrecked sailor. The poet says her joy is like the joy of a sailor whose ship has been smashed by Poseidon, who has been battered by violent storms, swallowing freezing salt water, fighting for his life in the dark, who finally, miraculously drags himself out of the surf and feels the solid, safe beach beneath his bleeding hands.
It's an incredibly brilliant literary device. Homer takes Odysseus's literal, physical, grueling struggles at sea over the past 10 years, and he perfectly mirrors them onto Penelope's emotional struggles at home. They have both been shipwrecked by life. They have both been drowning in grief and danger. And in that embrace, they have both just reached the shore. They are true equals.
It gives me chills every time I read it. It's no wonder this specific story, these specific emotions, have shaped the foundation of global literature. The literary legacy of how Homer built this narrative is staggering.
Absolutely staggering. The sources we're reviewing list the direct influences that echo down through history, proving that this isn't just an old poem, but the DNA of storytelling.
What are some examples?
The ancient Greek playwright Aeschylus used the terrifying underworld scene of summoning ghosts as the basis for his tragic plays. The agonizing image of trying to hug a ghost, as we discussed, became a central, poignant emotional beat for the Roman poet Virgil when he wrote the Aeneid to give Rome its own mythic history.
We mentioned Mary Wollstonecraft Shelley earlier. When she was writing Frankenstein, wrestling with ideas of ambition, creation, and monstrosity, she quoted the epic's lesson of steady purpose. Playwrights like Euripides and later poets like Callimachus were inspired by Homer's inclusion of characters like Eumaeus to invent gritty, realistic, working-class characters in their own poetry, breaking away from just writing about shiny kings and gods.
Even jumping into the 20th century, modern visionary thinkers like T.S. Eliot, in his monumental poem The Waste Land, mapped the disillusionment, the trauma, and the fragmentation of the modern world after World War I directly onto this ancient mythic cycle. The idea of the ruined wasteland waiting for the healing return of the true king is deeply rooted in Ithaca's plight.
And as one of our listeners requested we touch upon, the influence of this epic bleeds out of literature and directly into the real world, even into the capital markets and multinational brands we interact with every day.
Oh, absolutely. It's everywhere.
The word Odyssey itself has entered the dictionary to mean a long, wandering, eventful journey. You have car companies naming minivans the Odyssey to imply durability on long family trips. You have Trojan brand products utilizing the concept of impenetrable defense or sneaky infiltration. And you have Nike, named after the Greek goddess of victory who so closely associates with Athena's triumph in the epic.
Brands co-opt this mythic resonance because Homer tapped into the deepest layers of the human psyche. We inherently trust the weight of these symbols.
It's a testament to the fact that while the technology changes, human nature, our desires, our fears, our need for home remains exactly the same. But wait, I have to push back on the happily ever after ending of the actual story.
Uh-oh, what's the problem?
Because let's look at the reality of what just happened. Odysseus and Telemachus just locked the doors and murdered 108 high-ranking noblemen. These young men weren't orphans. They have powerful families on Ithaca and the neighboring islands. They have fathers, brothers, and private armies. Does the story just end with Odysseus and Penelope in bed pretending everything is fine?
No, it doesn't. And this is where Homer injects a heavy dose of realpolitik into the myth. It explores the messy reality of ancient blood feuds. The families of the dead suitors are furious. They gather an armed mob, led by the father of Antinous, and they march out to the countryside to attack Odysseus at his elderly father's farm.
So the epic, right at the finish line, threatens to devolve into an endless, self-perpetuating cycle of civil war, violence, and revenge. Blood demanding blood forever. So how does it stop? How do you resolve a completely unresolvable political crisis?
You cheat. Athena and Zeus literally drop from the sky. As the two armies clash and Odysseus kills the father of Antinous, Athena unleashes a terrifying divine shout that paralyzes the attackers with fear. She commands them to drop their weapons immediately and forces a binding, magical peace treaty upon the factions of Ithaca.
It's divine intervention on steroids.
Exactly. This exact moment in the Odyssey gave birth to the famous literary trope known as the Deus ex machina. Literally, the god from the machine. It's a term used when a divine figure, or a highly improbable event, intervenes at the last possible second to solve an unresolvable human conflict and neatly wrap up the plot. The gods mandate peace, the feud is erased from their memories, and the epic officially concludes.
So after going through all of this, the monsters, the magic, the slaughter, the gods, what does this all mean for you? For the 10th grade listener trying to navigate your own complex, stressful, sometimes overwhelming world right now, I think the Odyssey teaches us that true heroism isn't about being the biggest, the strongest, the most heavily armed, or the loudest person in the room.
It's not about brute strength. You don't solve your biggest problems with a sword.
It's about adaptability. It's about polytropon. It's about emotional endurance in the face of deep sadness. It's about recognizing your own folly, checking your ego before you yell your name at the universe, and realizing that sometimes to survive a hostile environment, you have to suppress your rage, put on a disguise, and play the long game.
It's about relying on your own steady purpose to navigate the chaotic storms of your life. It teaches us that the journey to find your true self, to build your true home, requires facing down your own internal monsters and, most importantly, resisting the comfortable lotus flower temptation to just give up when things get hard.
But as we close this deep dive, I want to leave you with one final, deeply provocative thought. It's a haunting detail from the text that lingers long after the poem ends. Remember the prophecy of Tiresias, the blind prophet, down in the dark pit of the underworld.
He warned him about the cattle.
He did. But he also told Odysseus that even after he wins his home back, even after he kills the suitors, even after the gods make peace, he cannot stay. He must leave Penelope again.
The final, mysterious journey.
Tiresias commands him to take a single, heavy ship's oar, put it on his shoulder, and walk inland. He must walk so far inland, away from the coast, that he meets people who know absolutely nothing of the sea. People who have never seen a ship, who don't even know what salt is.
And when a stranger mistakes his oar for a farmer's winnowing fan, he must plant the oar deep in the ground and make a massive final sacrifice to appease the wrath of Poseidon once and for all. Only then can he walk home to grow old and die in peace.
So think about that. After 20 years of fighting, bleeding, crying on beaches, enduring unimaginable horrors, and losing every single one of his friends just to get back to his living room and his wife, Odysseus is fated to pack his bags, put an oar on his shoulder, and walk away from his home again into the unknown. It leaves you wondering, for a human soul that has been forged in that much adventure, that much trauma, and that much relentless struggle, does the quest ever really end?